current U.S. Census data shows that 111,000 Californians moved to Texas last year. Now, to put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of taking a city the size of Dearborn, Michigan, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and dropping it right in the middle of Texas. And during the pandemic, the number of Californians that moved to Texas was even bigger than that. Now, Texas is a big state, and it does have 5 of the top 13 largest cities in the entire United States. But a portion of those Californians that moved to Texas landed in Austin. Now, some of them like it after they get here, but not all of them. So today, we're going to talk about the top reasons why Californians regret moving to Austin. We're going to use this article as a reference. Brett Alder, who wrote the article, moved from San Diego to Bee Cave, which is west of downtown Austin in the Hill Country. And after that, he moved back to the Bay Area. Now, all of this happened within a couple of years, so we can piece together a timeline to understand when all this happened and what type of market conditions he was dealing with during each one of these moves. Now, the other part of this is I've lived in Austin for a long time, but I've also lived in both LA and San Diego, so I can verify some of the things he's saying and, if necessary, dispute them. Now, let me first of all say that it's not my intention in this video to defend Austin. Frankly, Austin might not be right for everybody. But the second thing is I believe it is crucial that if anyone is contemplating uprooting their family and moving halfway across the country, that they get accurate information so that they can make good decisions on whether or not they want to move here. Now, the first thing we need to acknowledge is that before he wrote this article in 2023, he had already sold 2 houses and bought 3, which means that his move to Austin must have happened somewhere during the pandemic housing boom. His first sale was a 2,000 square foot house in San Diego. And if we look at median home values in that metro, we can assume that that house sold for over $1 million. Even if he had a mortgage on that house, he probably came to Austin with several $100,000 in cash available to work with. Now, since this was the time of intense bidding wars, he probably used a portion of that cash to bid over the list price for the house that he eventually bought in Bee Cave. Now, nobody would want to admit that they overpaid for a house, or that they had regrets about not having an inspection done, or if they bought a house without physically touring that house. All of this was very common during the pandemic housing boom. And since he makes reference to challenges in having repairs done in the home that he bought in Bee Cave, and having challenges in getting the type of money that he thought the house was worth when he decided he wanted to sell it, I think it might be reasonable to assume that he was looking for some place to place the blame. Now, in hindsight, we know that the market completely flipped between 2020 and 2022. Interest rates more than doubled in those 2 years, and buyers began to pull back. And sales prices on homes in the Austin metro began to decline. Now, if someone paid $100,000 or $200,000 more than a house was listed for in 2020, and then decided to sell it in 2022 and couldn't get that kind of money, I can understand they probably would be a little bit upset. But realistically, where does that blame really lie? You can blame it on Austin, you can blame it on the market, you could even blame your realtor. But remember, these types of stories are common in every city in the United States. And someone like this probably used a discount broker because in their mind, all real estate agents provide the same level of service, so it's really about finding someone who could provide that service at the lowest cost. Maybe one lesson in all of this is that there is usually a reason why some things are more expensive than others. Now, another thing he brings up is he was disappointed that there were no beaches or mountains in Texas. Someone who sold $1 million house in San Diego, bought a house in Bee Cave, probably paid more than it was listed for, sold that house in Bee Cave at a loss, and then bought another house in the Bay Area, which has more expensive real estate than either of those 2 cities. I think it's reasonable to assume that someone like that has some pretty high household income. And you would think that someone like that would have a basic understanding of geography. This is the United States. This is the Atlantic Ocean, and this is the Pacific Ocean. This is Austin. And you can clearly see there is no ocean anywhere close to Central Texas. That's almost like moving to Chicago and then being surprised you got 3 foot of snow in the winter. Now, I do empathize with him because it sounds like he had some small children and he encountered some challenges in finding some outdoor activities that the entire family could enjoy. But he makes it sound like California has acres and acres of public land compared to Texas, where it's only ranch land that's fenced off and nobody can get to it. If he lived in Bee Cave, he was literally minutes away from Zilker Park, which is 350 acres of public land. There are things like the Botanical Gardens with countless children's activities scheduled throughout the year, and the Barton Springs Pool, which is a public swimming pool filled with a natural spring. Not to mention all the boating, kayaking, hiking, and biking available along the Ann and Roy Butler hike and bike trails. Just north of Bee Cave is Lake Travis, which has boating, ziplining, and miles of trails. There is also the Hamilton Pool Preserve, which is one of the most beautiful public swimming spots in the entire area. Now granted, this is not the same thing as the Pacific Ocean or a ski lodge in the Rocky Mountains, but Central Texas does have a little bit more going for it than barbed wire and grazing cattle. Now he does acknowledge that the cost of living in Austin is lower than on the West Coast, which is the primary reason he moved here in the first place. He bought a house in Bee Cave that was twice as big as the one that he had in San Diego for about half the cost, and even goes on to say that the actual property taxes on those two properties were about the same. But he complains about the cost of cooling that house in the middle of the hottest summer we've had in the last 10 years. He says in the article that if he set the temperature to where it would be comfortable for his family, his electricity bill would be $400 a month. What he doesn't say is that in his mind it made more financial sense to move to the Bay Area, which is a cooler climate, in a smaller house with probably a lower electricity bill, but he would also have graduated state income tax. According to the tax table, if he made $200,000 a year, he would be paying the state of California $1,300 a month in addition to that lower electricity bill. Now, like I said earlier in the video, I have no problem with someone who just flat out doesn't like Austin. And frankly, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, whether that opinion is based on accurate facts, good logic, or not. I just think that if someone else reads his article, that it's probably in their best interest to read at least 10 others, and then do their own independent research to figure out what's fact and what's opinion. Also, I think the biggest question someone needs to ask themselves before they move to Austin is, what are you expecting? If you think Austin is separate from Texas and doesn't share the same history and traditions, you're probably going to be disappointed. Here are just a couple of examples. In Texas, high school football is almost a religion. In Texas, there are people who know more about caring for a horse than they do about writing computer code. And also, there are people in Texas who would be perfectly happy eating breakfast tacos and barbecue every single day. Now, if you live in a high-rise condo in downtown Austin, you may not have visibility to this every single day. But all you have to do is get in your car and drive 10 miles in any direction, and you're going to realize that you are in Texas. If you think you're going to come to Texas and change everything, let me tell you the story behind the battle flag for the Texas Revolution. The Texans had a cannon that originally belonged to the Mexicans, and Mexico wanted it back. So the Texans told them, all you have to do is come and take it. And of course, that didn't work out quite like the Mexicans thought it would. If you think about moving to Austin, I'm here to help in any way I can. And you might like this video because it's going to show you some of the housing options available along the Red Line Transit Rail.